Hi, my name's Dennis Frederick. Welcome to A Minute in the 1970s, and today we're going to talk about style. So let's get right at it. Style in the 1970s was really fractured between generations. There was a thing that we called the generation gap, where the generation that was socialized during World War II in the 1950s was really different than the generation socialized in the late 1960s and the 1970s. And here you see the difference. Here's a man from the World War II generation, or possibly slightly before, and he's in a suit. If you wanted to be respectable, if you wanted to be taken seriously in that generation, you wore a suit and you wore the requisite fedora hat. Lots of people wore fedoras back then, and in that generation, men just always wore hats. It was just, you didn't really think about it. And here's a fellow in the late 1960s, early 1970s style. As you can see, his hair is long. It's as natural as possible. The hair isn't particularly styled. It's just as natural looking as can be. And clothes are informal. And you see him, he looks like he's wearing army surplus pants and boots. And that was another thing that was very common in the 70s. And that was largely because they were cheap. They were some of the cheapest clothes, was to get army surplus. So he's wearing a poncho, which was very unusual prior to that generation, and he's wearing army surplus, and his hair is as natural as can be. And that gives you an idea of just how much of a social break there was between the generation, and we were all very aware of it. Younger folks, a very common expression was "don't trust anyone over 30," for example. So there was a real lack of understanding between those generations. Here's an example. This is the popular singer of the World War II generation. This is Frank Sinatra. As you can see, he's in the suit, in the fedora that you saw on all kinds of people. My dad had a fedora, and he was the World War II generation. And this is the most popular singer in 1976. So that really gives you the contrast. Very, very clean cut with a suit and fedora. Completely natural hair. Cut as little as possible, as long as possible. And this is my brother Don from the 1970s. Again, different people's hairstyles look different, mainly because their hair grew out differently. This is him with his hair grown out, as was very typical in the 1970s. He's wearing a suit, which is very unusual. That's mainly because it was school picture day, I guess. And this is my brother Dan on the left and my brother Dale on the right. You can see their hair is just long enough that it's kind of sticking out the back. It's not a brush cut by a 1950s brush cut by any form. It's longer hair, not super long, but still quite long. And my brother Dan is rocking some shades, some colored sunglasses, and look at them pants. Those, you just don't see colors like that. So he's wearing a striped shirt with a flashy belt buckle, and wow, look at those pants. And this is my brother Dale. He's sporting something that was also popular at the time, which was large metal belt buckles. And yep. And this is me in the mid 1970s. You can see I've got fairly long, natural hair, pretty unstyled. In fact, it would be quite acceptable for it to be a lot longer than that. I'm wearing my shirt undone and untucked, and I'm wearing bell-bottom pants, which is the first photo that you've seen of those. This was even much more common than army surplus, was to have bell-bottom jeans with the flared bottoms, like sailors used to wear in the Second World War. And I'm also not wearing any shoes, which typically I didn't wear shoes quite often in the summertime unless I was going out somewhere. And that's another example of the naturism, naturalism of the 1970s style. So that concludes this moment in the 1970s. Thank you very much for viewing.